What's up, my Yu-Gi Bros? I'm your host, one the only the RJB0. Welcome back to Decks and Techs Week. Today I am bringing you guys two tech talks because I didn't get to bring you one on Thursday. The very first one addresses one of the big problems with Floodgate cards. Actually, three of the big problems with Floodgate cards. The big problem with Floodgate cards are A, they can often be negated very easily, either by actually being negated through something like Wiretap or Trapstun, or by being hit by MST. Their second big problem is they often stop you from making plays as well as your opponent. The third problem is it's often very difficult to find a Floodgate card that can work for your deck, that can allow your deck to play the way it needs to while being effective against the majority of the meta. Now, the card I'm talking about today solves all of those problems, and that card is the End of Anubis. The End of Anubis is a level 6, 2500 zero dark monster whose effect says cards which activate in the graveyard or which target cards in the graveyard are negated. So your opponent, if you are playing as Burning Abyss, can't use any of their Burning Abyss cards. If your opponent is playing Shadows, they can't use any of their Shadow effects in the graveyard, so you can summon this guy, run over a Shadow Winda, and then they don't get their Shadow Fusion back to their hand. And against the Tellarknights, they cannot use any of the multitude of cards in their deck that summon monsters from the graveyard, whether it be called Haunted, Altair, or Soul Charge, so it locks down every deck in the meta. And one of the great things, it's actually really very difficult for this card to get negated like a standard Floodgate card, because your opponent has to waste a breakthrough skill on it, which is great, because even if they're using a breakthrough skill on your giant Floodgate monster, a lot of the decks can't even use any of their monster effects to get rid of him, except for maybe Tellarknights, because Burning Abyss don't have an effect in the graveyard which gets rid of End of Anubis, and Shadows don't have any monster effects which can activate in the graveyard to get rid of him, which means that they have to go for a bigger play in order to get rid of him, which opens them up to your own plays, for instance, Breakthrough Skill, or Bottomless Trap, or Torrential, or any of those things that your opponent would have to overextend themselves in order to use to get rid of the End of Anubis. So it's hard to get rid of, even if your opponent does use a card like Breakthrough Skill to negate it for a turn. A, they're wasting a Breakthrough Skill on something that isn't one of your major plays, and B, oftentimes they'll still have trouble getting rid of the End of Anubis while it's on the field. Now, it is once again vulnerable to some cards like, say, Phoenix Wing Wind Blast and other kinds of back row that can get rid of monsters, but there are a lot of easy ways of protecting it. And one of the really big things about it is, especially in a lot of rogue decks, a lot of tier 2 decks, it doesn't stop you from making plays. It doesn't stop you from using your own plays to gain advantage while it's on the board, which is one of the big problems that Floodgate cards have, is that if they hit a large amount of the meta, they often hit your deck as well. And even if your deck doesn't have the ability to make plays while End of Anubis is on the board, who cares? It's a 2500 beater. I can't think of any deck that is going to complain about losing their plays for a few turns while their opponent can't play and they have a 2500 beater to deal with. So that is a really amazing thing about the End of Anubis in particular. However, there are a couple of really cool things that are happening now in the current meta that make End of Anubis even more playable than before. Not only is it the fact that it can hit every deck in the format, but also the fact that we now have the Monarch Stormforth, making it really easy to summon. And Monarch Stormforth can get rid of some of those big monsters that the End of Anubis can't get around, like Dante. It can get rid of Construct, and once you use that, they can't activate their effects in the graveyard because you have the End of Anubis on the board. The other great thing is that it's a dark monster, which means that if you're running a deck that runs something like Dark Armed Dragon or Blackluster Soldier, you can use it as material for those things. In a Shadow deck, you can use it for Shadow Fusion even if it's dead in your hand. So it's got a great amount of utility, this format. It hits every deck, and it's a huge monster that your opponent has to deal with. So I think the End of Anubis is an absolutely awesome choice for this format. I hope you guys think so too. Let me know if you think End of Anubis is viable for this format in the comment section below. And of course, subscribe for more decks, discussion, analysis, and general Yu-Gi-Oh! Shenanigans. Thank you guys for watching. I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0, and I got a jet. See you guys.